You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday, February 11th, 2024, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. This is the day of the week, the time of the day where we play a play-by-mail game. We're in the middle of a case of Dear Holmes called the Yuletide Cipher. Today we'll be reading letter number 2. Let me check in with the chat. We'll do a little bookkeeping, then we'll get started here. So, small group today. YouTube says 10 concurrent viewers, 3 likes. I do hope if you appreciate the content on this channel that you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Let's do a little bit of bookkeeping first. The last few days on the channel, we've been playing through the 3rd box of Suspects. That's behind me on the wall here. So far, it's been a very good box, my favorite box of the series by far, and the last case we played was particularly good. I think we'll play the 3rd and final case in the next couple of days. If you want to join me for that, you could stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for the channel, and there's a game queue thread. You can let me know what days are good for you. I can see we already have a bit of a conflict between a couple of the people that have been joining for it. We could play it as early as Monday and as late as the weekend. In other news, today, just a half hour ago, in fact, an hour ago, I submitted High and Low, the detective film noir New York City game that I've been working on for the last 8 months with lots of help from people on the channel. Today was the final submission day for the local board game contest called Kudo Plays. So High and Low has been submitted. They will announce the results on March 30th. Don't have any expectations of winning anything. It was really just about having a concrete deadline to get something submitted. And I'm thrilled with how it went. And work will continue on High and Low for the foreseeable future. Okay, last bit of news before we jump into the case is that badges for Gen Con just went on sale. Gen Con is one of the largest board game conventions. It's in Indianapolis. I'm drawing a blank on the month now, August, I believe. If you are considering going, a couple of tips. Having a hotel connected to Gen Con, connected to the convention center, is a big deal. And to get a hotel, you have to be on the waiting list and get a time slot. So if you have a group of people that you think might be interested in going to Gen Con, I recommend you buy your tickets, your badges now, get on the hotel waiting list, see if you can get a connected hotel. Do get your badges mailed to you rather than pickup, since the will call pickup line can be hours long. What else? The channel is talking about something else. The other thing that we do at Gen Con every year is we buy tickets for the Hot Games room. That's the place where you can play and borrow and play the newest games that have just been released in the current year. So those are my tips for Gen Con. And if you think you will be going to Gen Con, let me know. I'll bring an extra co-op for 2 espresso mug, which I happen to have here with some espresso. I say espresso, but it's really espresso with half and half and sugar. Okay, so if there's nothing else in the chat, let's recap our case here. I can hear the dog next door is at it. Just 24 hours a day, that dog. Okay, so the Yuletide Cipher. The basic scope of the letter that we've gotten from Watson is that they've arrested someone for burglary of toy shops, Alden Flaherty, and he's part of a group that seems to be breaking into toy shops and then they sell the Christmas stuff. That dog. Okay. I love dogs, but boy, that's not right. I mean, it's just constant. It never stops. And the dog just stays in the yard. No humans interact with it. Okay, so anyway, they've arrested this guy maybe. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to. Oh, is it over? Okay, I guess it's over. I was going to close the window. Let's check in with the chat. Okay. So they've arrested this guy, and when they've arrested him, he said that there's a plot against the Queen. And so we're being written to basically for help about figuring out if this is real. And the reason why they think it might be real and not just some guy coming up with an excuse for why they shouldn't prosecute him is that they've intercepted some encrypted messages. So the first part of the letter just tells us the circumstances around his arrest. They've got 8 men breaking into the store. I noticed on rereading this that it's a little bit odd. Maybe let's just reread this. He says, we estimate 8 men, all masked, were involved in the robbery. Or rather, there were 8 criminals witnessed that night. The constables who arrived noted that there were 2 men passing sacks up to another 2 who were already in the carriage. They had broken into the toy store. We could hear the breaking of glass. Someone pointed out that it was, the text says he heard them arguing, so that was interesting. And then, okay, I'm going to close the window. Just give me a second here. Okay, ridiculous. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to this for a second. These are 8 men, and now look what they describe. 2 men passing sacks up to another 2 who are already in the carriage. Those 4 were joined by another person who is seen running from the shop alongside O'Flaherty and another individual. So the first thing that's a little strange is that gets us 7 people. Maybe there's a driver that's not being mentioned here. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, when I reread this, it occurred to me that it's a little ambiguous about how sure they are that O'Flaherty is actually part of this crew. In other words, they're 4 actually handling the merchandise. And then they say, those 4 were joined by another person who was seen running from the shop alongside O'Flaherty and another individual. So I think we should at least hold on to the possibility that somehow O'Flaherty and this other guy were up to no good, but were not part of this gang. Just keep that in mind. Okay, and then we're told a little bit more about this group that's been breaking into similar shops. If we do end up hearing about those other break-ins in the last couple weeks, we should try to pay attention. Is it always a gang of 7 or 8, or is it a smaller group? Okay. Then we get a little bit more about O'Flaherty. He's been in London for a couple years, born in Dublin, and then when they arrest him, he talks about the conspiracy to assassinate the Queen, and then he says, I can't talk about it anymore. I've said too much. Okay, and then he says, normally we wouldn't think twice about this, except for this incident that happened at the Trafalgar Telegraph Office, which is open 24 hours a day. You can drop off your telegraphs in an after-hours box. And a telegraphist noticed a cryptic message that she thought was odd, and she sent it in. The telegram was sent to Boston, and it is indeed in a bit of a code. It was sent to a Ronan O'Malley. We don't know who that is. And we spent a bunch of time last 2 weeks ago when we read this, trying to make sense of this code. We had some observations. We'll talk about that in a bit, but let's continue. So he talks about the code and his attempt, Lestrade's attempt to decode it without much luck. Comment about the date and time, which we'll get back to. And then he says, I want your help to figure out if this is all this guy just making something up, or could it be a real attempt on the Queen's life? No sooner does he send that we get sent a second letter from him later that day. Turns out there was another telegraph sent this morning, again in code, again addressed to the same destination, Ronan O'Malley. However, this time they catch the person, or they identify the person who's sending the second message. Could be the same person who sent the first one, we don't know. Someone named Tig, an odd name, Irish, Gaelic. The clerk knows him, remembers his odd name, describes him as hanging out in this bar. Burly man, and we're told a little bit more about him. He's been in London for at a minimum 3 or 4 weeks. They really don't know. It could be years, but she recognizes him for a couple weeks. Irish accent. Average height, not notably tall, slick, surprisingly neat brown hair. And here's the message he sent. Seems to be in the same code. And then he points out that this seems like a rather sophisticated code, not an obvious substitution code, which makes it odd that someone like O'Flaherty would be behind it, since he doesn't seem like super educated. But then he says, well, anyone could learn how to encode a message if someone taught them. That makes us think that there's a smarter person behind all this. Okay, and then that's where our case got submitted. Now, let me point out a couple of observations about the code, and then I'll get to some observations in the Discord that DJ Moneycut posted. So I've actually printed out larger copies of the code that we could look at if we wanted to. We had a couple of insights. Our first insight had to do with the time. At first we thought, well, is this get added automatically by the telegraphist? No, this is part of the message. So this top part certainly looks like it's the date, December 20th, December 21st. But the times look very suspicious. In fact, Lestrade thought this meant it got sent at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. We don't think that's right at all. This doesn't match the time that this was sent. And you can see when you look at the two side by side that the first one says 1:12, the second one says 2:12. We're dealing with Yuletide Cipher, December. It is the 12th month, but it feels like that these are either the indices, like this is message 1, message 2, or it's something else. At first we thought maybe this was being used to tell us how to decrypt. And I'm not so sure anymore. I think this is more like 1 of 12, 2 of 12. Then we tried to work on this cipher a bit. The observations we had to do with these double X's. So everything's in pairs, you can see. It's 2 letters form a pair. We thought about whether that was a Polybius square, where you've got a column and a row index for each letter. It doesn't seem right, though. Normally then you'd have like 3, 5 small digits that go from 1 to 5, whereas these are spanning the entire alphabet. Then you've got these double X's and double Z's. Note that both messages end with a double Z. That makes us think this is like a full stop, a period, perhaps a sentence end. And that's fairly convincing that this is sort of a sentence end symbol. But then you notice a couple of things. We've got one right here at the start of this message, and then one close to the end of this message. And that started us on a trail of thinking, is it that these are that the messages are interleaved? So it's like this R, T, P, T, E, T. If you do that, then this, well, I guess in that case you still have a Z right up front. But that was one set of observations, and maybe the X would be some other punctuation, maybe an apostrophe. Again, this is our oddity here. Another reason why we thought it might be interleaved, because some of these X's being right next to each other doesn't make sense, but it does make sense if you interleave it. And then there are lots of duplicates in a row, like T, 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 E, E, and then A, A, and so on. And We had some problems with that, whether you interleave or not. You get strings of the same digits. Like, look how many A's. We get A, all next to each other. And then we also noticed that there's a very small set of letters being used. Like, there's only, I think we counted like 9 different letters and 6 different letters. Was that it? In my original notes, just 9 different letters. And it was hard to figure out what kind of encryption would give you only 9 different letters. We tried to think about whether, if you look at the most common letter here, whether that would map to if it's a substitution cipher, the most common letter might map to the most common letter in English, maybe an E. So we tried to turn the T's into E's. We didn't get anything useful out of it. Second message has only 6 different letters. Is that right? S-A-U-I-E-W. Yeah, a very small number of letters. Okay, so that's where we sort of left it. And DJ Moneycut in the Discord had a theory. Let's take a look at what he wrote. He said, I'm now starting on the ciphers. I think the cipher is based on the 12 Days of Christmas song, with the lyrics used as a key of some sort. The first message being sent at 1:12, signifying the first day of the 12 days. And here I've written out the 12 Days of Christmas song. The first day is a partridge in a pear tree. He says, the letters used in the first cipher spell partridge. That's a very misleading way to say this, though, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's a little, the second is less clear, but its letters would be included in 2 turtle doves and a partridge. That feels a little misleading to me. If you look at our first message, to say that this spells out partridge is not accurate. It's not a fair description. I guess what he was saying is that the letters for partridge can be found. P-A-R-T, then another R-I-D-G-E, among many other letters, right? So I guess you could say that the 9 letters, well, what's the extra letter then? If there are 9 letters and partridge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 has 8 unique letters. What's the 9th letter that's not in partridge? Did I count these wrong? Why did we get 9 letters? 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7. Maybe there are only 8 letters. 8 unique letters. Is that right? Well, that's a little bit more convincing then. Let's see. There's our, just going to do it this way. P's for partridge. And our A's. And our R's. T's. Then R again. Then our I. T, R, and D. G, R, and E. Okay, so there's only 8 letters and 8 different letters, and they make up the 8 letters of partridge. So that's a little more compelling that we're only using the letters of partridge in our first message. So then if you look at our second message, let's write out all, and then maybe it would pay to write out our partridge, and then maybe even make a table of how many of each of these letters and what their positions are. But 1, 2, 3, 4 P's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 A's. 1, 2, 3, 4 R's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 T's. Then we've got our R again. 2 I's. 1 D. 2 G's. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 E's. Nothing obvious jumps out, but maybe their position. So you could imagine a code where you're just reusing those letters and the positions of them tell you something. Okay, so then the question was, if that is fairly convincing, actually, that if you look at all the letters in the first one, they spell exactly, can be used to spell partridge. If we look at the letters used in our second message, S, A, U, I, T, W, A, I, E, S, T, C, A, B, T, S, T, A, E, S, T, L. I don't know where I got 6 letters from this. It's obviously quite a bit more than 1. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 letters in this one. And 8 in our first one, right? 8 different letters. So what would this anagram to? And the point was that it doesn't anagram to turtle dove, but DJ was saying, well, the letters would fit in 2 turtle doves and a partridge. Oh, that's a little less convincing, isn't it? But this part is pretty convincing. 8 different letters. They're the exact letters that would spell partridge. Of course, they're the exact letters that the set of letters could be used to spell partridge, but obviously you could spell a lot more with the multiple copies. In fact, let me point out that partridge and pear tree would also be able to be anagrammed in Peartree. Okay. Anyway, that's where we are. Macon says the W here is a bit of a problem. Like, where are we going to find a W? Turtle, doves, partridge. Where's our W? Swans are swimming. Swans, I guess. But yeah, as far as the second day of Christmas. So it's an interesting idea. I think the compelling part about it is the idea that it's a Yuletide cipher. It's a Christmas cipher. It makes sense that you could try to use that song. But how would you be adding information? How would you be encoding it? Why would you be doing it? All right, before we open our next letter, I realize we spent a lot of time recapping here. The one important point that I wanted to make sure we remembered was our timeline here, because it is kind of important. If we believe this is all fake or related, we're being written to on 22 December, and this guy is caught. The thief is caught December 19th, 2 days ago from 21st of December. So I just want to point out he's caught December 19th, right? And then the letters, the ciphers start just being discovered on December 20th. The first one on December 20th and the second one on December 21st. So the reason that's so significant is that the ciphers only start, at least our first encounter with the cipher is after this guy has gotten arrested. So if someone's trying to fake these messages in order to help our guy get free, that is consistent. It's not like the ciphers started before he was arrested. So this could all be a ruse to get him released. All right. Let's finally open our next letter and see if we don't get, are we going to get more ciphers? Are we going to get some explanation from someone that's going to help us decode these? If you remember the way that the Dear Holmes system is supposed to work is that you might be able to figure it out early, and then over time you get more information. So maybe the people who are the most clever could figure it out early. Okay. Let us take a look at our letter for today. 3 sheets of paper. The first one today is coming from Telegraph Station. All right, well, let's read it. 10 Craven Terrace, Paddington, London, 23 December, so day after the previous letter. Dear Mr. Holmes, thank you for your letter. I greatly appreciate your willingness to involve yourself in this matter, and I'm pleased to write you with more than several discoveries in hand. Courtesy of one of my finest men, Constable Angelo Langley, we have intercepted 2 more mysterious telegrams today. Those I will transcribe for you, but only after explaining all else that Langley and I have uncovered. For another figure has entered the purview of our investigation, and a nascent theory suggests we may have been misled about this plot against Her Majesty. First, you should know that my latest attempt at questioning O'Flaherty led to no new information regarding the conspiracy or his gang's connection to it or the telegrams. He would not admit to knowing of the Tig we referred to. Nevertheless, we now have evidence suggesting they are acquainted and, among other things, part of the same band of thieves. This evidence stems from the work of another inspector at the yard, Alexander Antonsley, who was aided by one of our, if you will believe it, telephonists, Andrea Bayard. Miss Bayard valiantly agreed to pose as Inspector Antonsley's beloved, and the two have been discreetly observing the movements of all those entering and exiting the Trafalgar Square telegraph office. The office, in turn, has graciously agreed to suspend use of its deposit box until our investigations end. Our pair of lovers was told to remain seated on a bench some feet from the now defunct deposit box. Bayard was instructed to simply draw the nearby scenery in a small journal, as Antonsley kept watch for anybody of note. Inspector Antonsley was one of the two men who witnessed the end of the burglary at Follies, Constable Langley being the other. So it was my hope that he would spot one of those men again if they approached the telegraph office. Inside the office, staff were given their own set of directives. All clerks were instructed to hastily but casually place a blue-colored "Long waits expected" sign outside immediately upon receiving any telegram matching the style of those we have been attempting to decipher. That person was then to remain posted at the entrance and cautiously signal to Antonsley and Bayard, sitting nearby, who the sender of note was as they walked away. In the case that either Antonsley or the staff observed a suspicious person or persons, he was discreetly to follow behind them with Bayard, giving her an opportunity to record any conversations in her journal. Our plan came to fruition in more ways than one this afternoon. At 3 p.m., when the telegram sender, Tighe, returned to Trafalgar Square as we had hoped, before the staff inside recognized him or his peculiar telegrams and posted the blue sign, all of which they did, Inspector Antonsley was able to make a most satisfying discovery. On seeing Tighe approach the telegraph office, he recognized him as the coachman who had been driving the carriage during the robbery at Follies. In other words, we may finally draw a clear line from O'Flaherty and Company to these telegrams. Okay, that's exciting. Putting that aside, Bayard and our man were able to keep pace with Tighe for some time and managed to overhear some useful talk. Miss Bayard's report, referring to Tighe as messenger, is available for your review. And here it is. Messenger identified at 2:58 p.m. walking past deposit box. Enters Trafalgar Square office alone, hurries out some minutes later without lifting gaze from the ground. We pursue. Turning onto the Strand, he is joined by another chap, similar in stature but no hair. The bald man approaches, says, "Doyle, everything goes swell?" Messenger nods. 4 or 5 paces, then he says, "Kennedy's involving us in something that..." He falls silent again. Other one seems stunned. "Something that's what?" he says. Messenger stops and says, "Not worth our time, first of all." As he utters those words, they have stopped walking, and we step beyond the range of hearing. Whole conversation lasted perhaps 30 paces. So there you have it, Holmes. The man who has been witnessed delivering the telegrams is named Tighe Doyle, and although his associate remains unnamed, we now have another trail to follow beyond that of his. I intend to question O'Flaherty again, this time with regard to Kennedy. If Doyle and the man are connected by means of this gang, then at the lowest estimate, O'Flaherty should know of him too. I will also note that before this, Constable Langley paid a visit to the Silver Cross at my behest. There he confirmed that Doyle is known by most of the staff, especially the barmaids. They referred to him only as Tighe. We had not yet learned his surname at the time of this inquiry. Still, Langley was able to verify that the man had not been seen at the Silver Cross since the 18th of December. This concludes my summary of our latest findings. But in addition to these, I shall address another pair of developments. The first concerns a man who has been observed lurking outside of the prison cells where O'Flaherty is being held. O'Flaherty is being held underneath Bow Street Magistrates' Court, as the normal prison cells are full of people who have overindulged themselves celebrating the season. Twice in the last 24 hours, a guard has witnessed a man circling the vicinity. The first time, close to 3 a.m., staring towards the cell windows. As soon as the guard stepped outside to regard him more closely, he claims that the lurker turned around and went off like a dart. The guard remained posted outside afterwards, and sure enough, the man was back no less than an hour later, but he walked away without pause when he noticed me there. Following that incident, we were informed, and Constable Langley, who might recognize someone from O'Flaherty's crew, was dispatched as an additional patrol. Having spent but a limited amount of time on guard, he has yet to encounter the man in question. However, he speculates it may just be an exasperated neighbor, as it seems O'Flaherty fancies himself a caroler. Man's trying to drive 'em all mad with his incessant whistling. He keeps it up, I venture to surmise they'll move him into a cell without windows, with a solid door. Very suspicious. The second development I wish to relay is in fact the nascent theory mentioned at the start of this letter. You may be surprised to learn that it was put forth neither by Inspector Antonsley nor Constable Langley, but rather by Miss Behard, and I have told her that which you will likely think to yourself on reading this, lacking in evidence. Nevertheless, I see merit in the young telephonist, and she has alerted us to something that I am forced to admit may be of import. There appears to be a group of musicians, Reina, traveling through England in the coming days. Bayard has noted that the group is quite célèbre in their home country of Spain, which is why they are planning for a public performance here in London near Pall Mall on the 26th of December. The reason this is noteworthy, she argues, is that Reina is the Spanish word for queen. As I noted, this is insubstantial evidence, if it can be considered evidence at all. Yet we would be remiss to ignore it, for a plot involving some young musicians rather than Her Majesty the Queen seems more aligned with O'Flaherty and Company's usual aspirations. Have you any insight on any of this, and how it may all be entwined with the strange telegrams? Here you will note the latest two, written in today's early hours, it seems, and then left by Doyle at the Trafalgar Square Telegraph Office this afternoon. Telegram A. Okay, so now look at this one, 812. Not 312 as we might have expected, but 812. It's paired. It's all pairs. It's formatted differently, though. This one is formatted as a 4x5 grid, whereas our other ones were longer. Why would that be, I wonder? All right. Oh, it continues, I see. Telegram B is 3. Is there a pattern to the length of these? Let's just see here for a second. I'm just looking at the number of columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So our first two messages are 9 columns, then 2 rows and 3 rows. Our 8th message is 1, 2, 3, 4. And our 3 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hard to see any pattern there. All right. Can you make anything of this? My main method of decrypting a substitution code lies in the frequency of individual letters. For instance, in an English text, you will understand that the letter E will most often dominate in frequency. Thus, I begin there. Once E is identified, I can more easily discern other letters and thereby make out individual words. In spite of this, I have found little success when applying my method to the intercepted telegrams. Indeed, the most frequently employed letter in each telegram has varied, such that I am becoming increasingly convinced that each one employs a unique method of encryption. I will be straining I will be straining every sinew to unscramble these messages until you have advised me, but please do not delay, for though we have learned much, it feels as if we are only further from the truth. Now, there's one more letter to read here, one more page, but I do want to note this part. Our telephonist says there's a group called Reina, and Reina is Spanish for the word queen. So I guess what she's trying to suggest is that in the first letter, Lestrade thought maybe the T's are E's and this maps to Queen. That was his theory. It didn't really pan out. But she's saying that maybe it did have the word queen, but it was referring to this group. That doesn't seem very helpful to me. What about, do we still end always on these? Yes and yes. So we still got Z's as at the end of each message and in between, which seems like sentence breaks. And then there's some theory about the 8 and the 2. So where's my notes here? The channel is suggesting that the 8th message would be 8 maids a milking, which would be this one. We do have M's. We have lots of other letters, though. But it does seem like you might get milking. MAIDS, there's the K. I think that's right. I think you've got it. I think I think we do have maids milking, in our number 8. Those look like the letters you would use to spell maids milking. And then our third one should be French hens. Well, there's our H's. But where's our C? Maybe it's not French hens. Maybe it's just hens. HENS. A little troubling that there's no C for French. But maybe there's a version of the Yuletide that doesn't have French hens. Does anyone know? Because is it? Yeah, I think this is actually the suspect, because I think I remember hens laying. Oh, geese laying. Where is the French hens if it is French hens? Where's the C? Where is the C in French hens? That's a little bit of that's a little bit troubling. Aiken says, I wonder if the 312 letter turns out to be an error. Well, clearly, if this is right, and the maids of milking really feels right about to here. So if that's right, it still doesn't tell us how they're hiding information in this message. It doesn't tell us about the extra letters. It doesn't tell us what the positions are encoding. It just seems to be telling us that the one clue to the letters being used. Now, there are some codes that involve you writing out a message at the top and then doing the alphabet underneath it. So in other words, there's a bunch of codes where you would say, okay, we're going to start with maids a milking. And then you start filling out letters underneath it, A, B, C, D, E. When you get to a duplicate, you don't use it. F, and so on. We're going to have to check my records for that. Then you would know that M turns to A goes to B, I goes to C, and so on. So that's a possibility. I'm going to have to check my code books on different codes that use such a system where you spell out the phrase and then you line up the alphabet underneath it, something like that. But it wouldn't it doesn't really explain what to do with the extra letters. Okay. And it doesn't explain why the width of these are different. Maybe that tells you something else. All right, let's read our next letter here. So that was this on December 23rd, and then we have a follow-up letter. What's this? Dr. Watson, same date, same location. I've received your message from Holmes inquiring about Her Majesty's movements. Hopefully I'll be able to have this response delivered along with the letter I dispatched earlier today. While the information is highly confidential, half coincidences would be absurd in the circumstances we face. I simply beg of you not to disclose any of this to anybody beyond yourself or Mr. Holmes. The Queen returned to London from Windsor by royal train on the 20th of December at approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She will remain in London until the 24th, tomorrow, on which she will depart for Norfolk. Although it is custom for her to spend the first day of Christmas at Buckingham Palace, as this allows both for Her Majesty to receive guests and for the members of her court to see their families, she much prefers the comforts of her estates on the countryside. Accordingly, the royal train will be moved to Liverpool Street Station this evening. Tomorrow it will carry Her Majesty to Wolferton Station, which is on the edge of Sandringham House, her Norfolk estate, so that she will certainly be there by Boxing Day. That is the second day of Christmas, to attend church services and carry out her customary duties. Railway staff have been paid what I imagine to be a minor fortune for their labor during these days, but plenty of goodwill come from her trip, or so I am told. Plenty of good will come from her trip, or so I am told. Her Majesty will spend Boxing Day outside of the church at Sandringham, presenting charitable boxes to the needy, and as tradition dictates, she will be enjoying but a simple meal from a box, so that the servants are allowed some leisure time with their families. I have always wagered that she has them prepare her a nice meal beforehand, but I suppose the gesture is kind all the same. In any case, the Queen will stay in Norfolk until the start of the new year, whereupon she will return once more from Wolferton Station to Liverpool Street to the palace. There she will remain until the 12 days of Christmas have passed, and then she will again relocate to Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. That I am aware of, there are no further plans for her at present. Queen Victoria's age indeed makes it difficult to lay out specific plans too far in advance. When she does travel from locales such as the train stations above to her residences such as Buckingham Palace, she travels in a closed, unmarked carriage with sidesmen at each door. Unmarked carriages normally lead and trail behind Her Majesty's carriage as well, playing the role of escort. As you will know, bystanders might realize that they are witnessing an escorted carriage and thus a personage of importance, but they have no manner of knowing quite how great the importance, and in that way our queen is able to hide in plain sight. The same procedures will of course be followed for the journey to Liverpool Street tomorrow, and when traveling from Wilferton Station to her house on the Sandringham estate, and so on and so forth. With respect to your final question concerning the customary route from Buckingham to Liverpool Street Station, this tends to vary. In general, her chauffeur will exit the palace and proceed through the Mall to Trafalgar Square, whereupon they will head east along the Strand. Oftentimes, she will pass St. Paul's Cathedral en route to Bishopsgate before finally boarding the royal train at Liverpool Street Station. As already stated, this does often vary in minor ways, but the general trajectory of her path is as such. Does this level of detail suffice? Should Mr. Holmes require anything further, do not hesitate to ask. Though anything more precise regarding confidential matters may be difficult to provide, I will endeavor to use every resource at my disposal. My gratitude again, G. Lestrade. All right, well, lots of details of her travel. If you were looking for what plain text might be encoded by a secret message of someone trying to plot an assassination, maybe you'd expect some of these proper names, or the word train or Sandringham, etc. But it seems like that's a bit of a stretch. No numbers in the code that might be suggesting dates, so that's a little bit suspicious. All right, let's go through this again and highlight anything that seems important here. Where was they set up this plan and they caught our guy. So let's see what they caught. Okay, so they're following behind him after he drops off the cipher. They recognized him as the coachman. So Tig is the coachman. So the theory that they might be unrelated is false. They are obviously all of this gang. Okay. He sends his telegram. He's joined by another chap. Similar in stature, no hair. He says, Doyle, did everything go well? So that tells us our guy is Tig Doyle. Did everything go swell? He nods. Then he says, Kennedy's involving us in something. Kennedy's involving us in something that's ... The other one seems stunned. Something that's what? Messenger stops and says, not worth our time, first of all. Has he spotted that he's being followed and is not and is not talking. And who is Kennedy? So if we were making a list of names that have come up, we've got Alden O'Flaherty is the guy that's arrested, and Ronan O'Malley is the guy that's being sent telegrams. Let's just make our cast of characters here. We have Alden O'Flaherty, and we've got Ronan O'Malley. Then we've got Tig Doyle, Tadge, Doyle. And then we've got Kennedy. Not worth our time. They certainly don't seem to be discussing an assassination. He's going to ask him about Kennedy, see if he can admit. He hasn't been back to the Silver Cross since the 18th of December. That's a little odd. Then there's another man outside of the prison cell. As if he's trying to hear or talk to O'Flaherty. And then we get a very suspicious statement, right? Look at this weird, suspicious statement. He says, the guy's clearly trying to talk to him or get near him. But then this is the part that's suspicious. He says, it seems O'Flaherty fancies himself a caroler. Incessant whistling. That feels like that's his message of communicating secret information. Doesn't it? That jumps out as being like a code of communication. And this guy was trying to hear what he was trying to say. And then we get our telegrams. In odd shapes, always ending with Z's. Let's check in with the chat. Veggie Dog says there are over 20 variations to the lyrics, according to Wikipedia. Only one has a variant as the third day. That one uses turtle doves on the third day and French hens on day 2. They really are saying 12 days of Christmas a lot in this letter. The food detail's a bit odd, as if they'll try to poison her. That's an interesting idea. Let's think about the idea of a code as a general concept. The idea of a code which uses only letters from a phrase. So we probably should look up some codes that use this thing, but I don't know of any offhand. But if we think about it for a second, let's just brainstorm some theories. If I told you, here's a phrase, for example, a partridge in a pear tree. If I said, okay, here's the phrase that I'm going to be able to tell you to use just by telling you it's the first day of Christmas. So you and I both know that a partridge in a pear tree is going to be the key to the message. So how would I communicate an arbitrary message to you now that you know this using only these letters? Well, one way is we could agree that we're going to write the letters of the alphabet underneath. Okay. And you might even just repeat it. Partridge. V, W, X, Y, Z. Okay, so you've written out a partridge in a pear tree, a partridge in a pear tree, and maybe we've written the alphabet underneath it. And that would be for the first day's message. And then you might imagine that we've got repeated letters here. But how could you, because this P matches with this B, and this P matches with an N, and this P matches with a W, how could you know which one? And why would you have any letters that aren't part of that? So our first message is just partridge. So you might, and so it's not a partridge in a pear tree, although it's almost enough letters for pear tree. But if it's just partridge over and over again, and then we put our alphabet underneath it, then you'd have to have a way of saying which of the P's you were talking about when you encountered a P. Which A. A very weird idea for a code. Although I suppose if each code only uses 8 or 9 letters, then you could create a grid, partridge on one side and partridge on the top. With the alphabet inside it. And then so on. And then work with pairs of letters. Like RE would be RE. But a problem there is anytime you have 2 letters in the word, like partridge, and then you could ask, what would you do with the rest of these? You could just keep going and give alternate ways of alphabet. That wouldn't be a bad idea. This gets back to each pair being a coordinate. But we came to the conclusion that that was unlikely because of these X's and Z's don't seem to match with the coordinate system. That's what got us thinking it was interleave. M. Johnson says, with this level of complication in the cipher between the Boston contacts, I believe this is well beyond basic toy robbery. That's a good point. DJ Moneycut says, when he said not worth our time, is it because these messages are bogus, just meant to distract the police? Moneycut says, this all seems very complicated for a gang of toy thieves. Let us... So the first message, I'm just trying to think of joints to carve this chicken. Our first message has 8 unique letters, which are the letters of partridge, but also include pear tree. So let's see if we can't make progress on our others. So let's take this one for a second. The 8th one is our maids a milking, huh? All right. Let's look at the unique letters in this one. I, E, M, K, S, G, L, H, K, M. I've got a T, E. We've now got an I. Already got the G, the E, the L, K. There's a D that's new. I, S, A. Did I have an A before? A. MS. So you can see MAIDS, MILKI. Do we have an N? We don't have an N. For our maids are milking, we don't have an N. That's problematic. Boy, it really looked like we had maids of milking, but we have no N. Why would that be? That's troublesome. We have no N. Well, that's troublesome. So if you look at this, did I transcribe something wrong? We have an H that we don't need for maids of milking. And we don't have an N that we do need for maids of milking. We also don't need the E. I guess we need the H and the G if we're going to say 8. So 8 maids. But we don't have milking. Do we need? We do need milking. If it was just 8 maids, we wouldn't need the L. That's troublesome, but we can spell out the 8 again. That would explain why we have the H. And the T. But it's odd that we don't have an N. All right, let's look at our next one. This would be our 3 French hens. Again, we're missing a letter. We're missing the C. 3 French hens, but do we have the... I'm going to make this one is 8. So where are the unique letters here? N, E, U, T, D, L, S, N, H, S, T, E, T, D, H, E, S, U, E, T. Okay. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. So we don't have the C to do French. Well, we don't have an F either. This one really feels off. And this one doesn't seem to match our pattern, does it? I mean, you can get hens. I suppose we should be looking maybe for an Irish version of this song. Is there a variation, a Gaelic or Irish variation that's not three French hens? Hens. Boy, what else would you do though? And how are you going to get three? You've got no R. That's problematic. Hmm. And what's with the width here? I find that very curious how these are different width telegrams. There's something else odd, like the sheer number of double letters that are in a row. It seems very odd. E, H, T, E. Here's the double E. Like, that does not seem like it should be happening by chance. Even if it's not a substitution cipher, it just seems very odd that we would get. My gut thinks it seems very odd that we would get these. Is it possible that we're meant? Oh, we already talked about. I talk about this a lot when we work on codes about going left to right and up down. But the way this ends here suggests you do read it left to right, top to bottom, not this way. You didn't catch the letter O on your list. Yes, you're right. There's an O on this one. Is there an Irish version of this song that's not French hens, but something else hens? It seems too big a coincidence that we almost have maids a milking. Is it possible that the X's are in fact sort of wild cards? Do we only need one letter from each? Like if we had, not really. This one needs three French hens. So you need an R and a C. But you could imagine that the X's were wild cards. Or sort of like when you're missing something you take from there. Then we would say our previous ones, we need an N. and we would get it from our X. There's a Mr. Show episode where they're asking to break down a dollar bill, and in each scene, each person is making different sounds as they're thinking. One guy's going, each person as they go through these 5 or 6 scenes is coming up with different ways. It's hard to describe. If you haven't seen Mr. Show, go check it out. Was on HBO, I believe, originally. It's David Cross and the guy who's from Better Call Saul, whose name I'm blanking on, who I ran into on a bus to the airport one day with his girlfriend. Okay, well, we're going to end it here. If you're curious, if you have some more thoughts before next week's session, you can come by the Discord for this channel where we might be discussing theories on the Cipher. Feels like we might have enough, someone who's good at ciphers might have enough to figure it out. You'll find a link to the Discord on the About page. The other thing I will mention while we're doing a little bit of history and deciphering, I was just reading an article about how they've finally decoded some of these papyrus scrolls that had been wrapped up, and basically they were in such bad shape they couldn't unwrap them. So they did some electron scan microscopy and used AI, held a contest to try to decrypt it. And so these thousands-year-old scrolls that are so damaged you can't even unwrap them, they managed to start decoding them, and they're in the process of it. So I don't have more information, but probably that's enough to get you to be able to do a search for it and find it. We'll be discussing all that and more on the Discord. We'll continue this playthrough of Dear Holmes next Sunday, same time. And between now and then, we'll probably play a game of Suspects. Thanks for joining me. If you do manage to make some progress, remember that we're behind the actual letters. So there are people out there who have seen all of these letters and know the answer. So don't give us the answer if you've read ahead. But if you haven't read ahead and you have some theories, I'd like to hear them. And I'll see you all next time. Hold on. It sounds like KM Bose did some of the things we were talking about and actually got a message. So let me check in here. If we map a partridge in a pear tree to the alphabet, which is what I was doing here. Where's my proof? So I did this, a partridge in a pear tree, and I mapped it to the alphabet as a theory of how you might decode this. Then I went down and did partridge. Okay, so I did this. Now, it sounds like Cambo says, if we map a partridge in a pear tree to the alphabet, which is exactly what I did here. But Cambo said it actually ran it and got Queen has returned to Buckingham. Is that right? Let's do it. So what you're saying is that I worried about when I did this. I said, well, you don't have unique items then. So the R could be going to a D or a Q or a Y, but KMBO says DQ, DFQ. Oh, there's the F. So DFQ. And then the E is going to either a J or an O, T or a U. So J, O, T, or a U. And then the T would go to an E, and so on. If you write out for each letter all the mappings into the alphabet, KMBO says you get Queen has returned to Buckingham. Well, that feels like we've basically got this system cracked then. The only thing that would probably has an answer is which of these three letters, when you have a letter that maps to each to different things, how would you decide which one? Maybe there's a way to figure that out. What did you do for the X's? Queen, just a word break. And then the T. Well, how did you get has returned? Queen. If I've got a T going to an E or an R. Oh, Queen returned, not has. I get T goes to E, R, T. So the first one would go to R, the second one would go to E, and this goes to T. So not Queen has returned, but Queen returned to Buckingham. Okay, so let's take a look at this for a second. This feels right to me. So if you think about that, this tells us the X's are word breaks, which makes sense to us. Then we've got a two-letter word here. Our E's can map to T's, J's, or O's. So the idea is it's mapping to a T here and an O here. Okay, so let's think about this for a second. We've got a major breakthrough here. What have we learned? We've learned this is the basic idea. Now I'll note that this may be why we don't have all the letters, because they're not necessary. Once you know that the phrase is a partridge in a pear tree, because it's the first month, you don't have to use all of the letters in the message. So we've got 8 maids a milking. It's okay that we don't have an N. It just means that when you write out 8 maids a milking, the letters under the N's of the alphabet aren't actually in the message. So that explains why some letters are missing. Now, we've also figured out what the X's are. The double X's are word breaks. The Z's are going to be our sentence breaks, just as we hypothesized. Now, the nature of this means that it's the full phrase, so not just a partridge. We don't really care if enough letters are there for it, as long as there aren't letters that are not used in the top message. So 8 maids a milking, as long as we've got no letters outside the group. Now, 3 French hens, that's fine. Except we do have a letter here that we're not sure where that D is. But okay, let's put that aside for a sec. This feels right. Now, two things, or one other additional big thing, is that I guess the channel wants to decode what these messages are. I'm more interested in solving this last little puzzle. So each letter, when it comes up multiple times, can map to multiple plain text. So the P could, or the R here in this example, could be D, F, or Q. Or more easily in this case, the E's can map to J's, O's, T's, and U's. So if E maps to J, O, T, and U, and it doesn't always map to the same thing, one question is there a system for figuring out which it does map to? It's possible that there isn't. It's possible that just that once you know the 3 letters it could be, each one, that's enough of a constraint to solve it. It is certainly is enough for us to solve it. You might expect, though, there to be a way that it gives you an exact. A couple of things do jump out, though, as being helpful to know. First of all, we know that a given letter can map to different ones of its 4. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so sometimes the E maps to the T, sometimes it maps to the O. And I'll note it's not dependent on which of the pair it is, because here's a left-hand pair mapping to a T, and here's a right-hand pair mapping to a T. And if you are writing a message, you have to have some control over it. So short of additional information, which I don't see, it feels to me like maybe the message can't tell you which letter to use, and you have to just infer it by constraint satisfaction, because I don't see a good way to do it otherwise. We've got no extra letters being used to give us positional information. They don't have control over like the fine spacing or rotation. So it doesn't feel like you have control over it. And if you want to get a certain letter, if you want to get the T here, you have no way to do it other than have an E. So it looks to me like we're not going to be given a choice. We're just going to have to, you could solve this through some code a little bit. And this E goes to the U. So my hunch is that there is no good way to know which of the 4 E maps this is and which of the 4 E maps this is, other than making sense of it. Okay, so we've got a big breakthrough live on the channel here. It was this idea. I came up with this map, but then I gave up on it because of these redundancies, but KM Bose took it seriously and actually decoded it. Okay, so now let me understand what the chat is now saying about this advice and wrap. A-R-A-G-T. A-R-A-G-R-T. So the chat is saying, as far as this last part, so Queen returned to Buckingham, and then we've got a sentence break, and then this last word is advise, is the guess. A goes to A. The R goes to either an F or a Q or a Y. Oh, sorry, ADV, which is my theory that it wraps around. KM says that seems to be true. So we get advise, which would be like a question. Queen returned to Buckingham, advise. Okay, so I feel like we've cracked this. I feel like we have cracked this code on our letter number 2 with some real teamwork here in the channel. And thanks to KM Bose, who followed through and actually did the work of figuring out how you could break it down. Okay, well, I feel pretty proud that this actually turned out to be true, and real credit to KM Bose for actually trying to make a message work from that. So it feels like we now have enough to solve the 4 ciphers we've got hold of. And we don't have, there is no reason then for the formatting. But we have solved our mystery of why there are certain letters missing. From the 8th day of Christmas, maids milking, there's no N, but that's okay. It just means that when you do the lineup, that when you get 8 maids of milking, whatever the N is, you don't use that letter. All right, so we should be able to decode our 3 remaining messages. But I'm not inclined to do that here live on the channel. We can leave that for an exercise for the viewers. We certainly will figure it out and talk about it on the Discord. Pretty exciting, right? At the last minute after I signed off, I saw the message from Cambos. All right. Good teamwork. Very exciting. You'll have to wait till next week to get the message, or you could decode it yourself, or you could drop by the Discord where we will certainly be posting the decrypted messages. Is there a name for this kind of cipher? I've not seen it before. I'd like to know. If you know what the name of this kind of cipher is, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.